George, need for you to unmute. There we
Can you
go.
hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay. Yeah, I'm going to try to show a video today, which I've not tried before. So this presentation will be about the Valley of Lemuel and a little bit about the highlights of Lehi's trail. I've cut way back. My presentation usually takes an hour and a half to get down to Nephi's Harbor. So we're going to kind of abbreviate it tonight. Is the Book of Mormon true? The first 8% of the story took place in Arabia. Just follow the directions. They went south, southeast. They, by the shore of the Red Sea, they had to be in Arabia. Otherwise, it'd be out in the middle of the water. What could Joseph Smith have known about Arabia? Well, basically nothing. If you look at the resources he had available to him, and the fact that hardly any of the trail we're going to talk about tonight actually had been seen by any Westerners before the Book of Mormon was published. What do I know about the Arabia? Well, quite a bit, actually. I spent 27 years there, and we drove over 50,000 miles on desert roads trying to retrace Lehi's trail. Each of my books that I wrote have hundreds of scholarly references, mostly by non-LDS archaeologists and historians. It's not all my research. I had help from dozens of people living in Arabia, including Arabs and Muslims. And it was so fun to be out on a campfire at night in the middle of the desert with my Arab friends saying, oh, I think Lehi went this way. I think the trail actually went through this wadi, not that wadi. So it was a great experience for me and a lot of fun. We had people from all over the world. We had experts from Aramco helping us on the geography. So I had lots of help on this research. But what do critics say about the Book of Mormon and Arabia? One says the Book of Mormon contains geographical errors since Arabia has no rivers. Hagoff argued that Arabia probably never had a true river in all its immense areas. Well, what do these people know about Arabia? Not very much, actually nothing. So where is the river? Well, instead of talking, again, I think what I'll do is just turn and put on a video for you. Whoops.
Corner of what is today Saudi Arabia. Among these scholars is Dr. Hugh Nibley, who states of this barren region, quote, the desert into which Lehi first retreated and in which he made his first long camp has been known since Old Testament times as the wilderness par excellence. The particular waste in which Lehi made his first camp is among the most uninviting deserts on earth. Detestable certainly describes the place in the eyes of Lehi's people, who murmured bitterly at being led into such a hell, unquote. But Nephi described a fertile valley with many fruits, grains, and a river of flowing water. After completing an exhaustive 44-year study of Saudi Arabia's water resources, United States Geological Survey and Saudi Arabian Department of Water Resources concluded, Saudi Arabia may be the world's largest country without any perennial rivers or streams. Where is the fertile valley of Lemuel in a land described as hell? And where is its river of flowing water in riverless Arabia? From what George had read in the Book of Mormon, he reasoned that the Valley of Lemuel must be a mountain canyon. Nephi wrote that the valley was in the borders, which meant the mountains. The Arabic word for mountain is Jebel, which conjugates in Hebrew as Jebel, which means the borders. The mountains in northwest Arabia are called the Hijaz, that literally means in English, the barriers or borders. Linguist Hugh Nibley noted that borders should be capitalized because that's what the area has been called, the Jebel, which means the borders. Nephi wrote that the valley was in the borders, meaning the valley was in the mountains. Since the valley of Lemuel was in the mountains, it must have been a canyon. Webster's dictionary defines a canyon as a deep, narrow valley with steep sides, and often with a stream flowing through it. The classic definition of a canyon seems to match Nephi's description of the valley of Lemuel. He wrote that his father pitched his tents near the Red Sea, next to the river, inside the valley. Yet at first, his father did not initially realize that the river emptied into the Red Sea. The most logical explanation is that steep and narrow canyon walls prevented Lehi from seeing the Red Sea. Second, we knew that the valley had a small stream flowing continually through it. Nephi indicated that it was a river of water. Dr. Nibley clarified for us what this meant. Dr. Nibley notes, the expression river of water is used only for small local streams. The river of Laman must have been a small local stream, no name known to Lehi. It cannot, therefore, have been an important stream, let alone one of the most remarkable on earth, or Lehi would have known about it. Third, the valley of Lemuel opened onto the fountain of the Red Sea. The footnote in the Book of Mormon suggests it was on the Gulf of Aqaba, which is in the Red Sea. Fourth, the valley of Lemuel was very fertile. Nephi wrote that they gathered many kinds of fruits, seeds, and even grain. However, Saudi Ministry of Agriculture has classified all the lands near the shore of the Gulf of Aqaba as 0% arable due to poor soil and rocky conditions. Apparently, scientists do not know of any such place, but Nephi saw a river in a firm and steadfast and immovable valley and wrote about it. So, what instructions did Nephi give us for finding the valley of Lemuel? He wrote that they traveled in the borders. If we replace the term borders with mountains, we read, and he came down by the mountains near the shore of the Red Sea, and he traveled in the wilderness in the mountains, which are nearer the Red Sea. Note that Nephi first wrote that they traveled by the mountains, and then in the mountains. The mountains they traveled in were the mountains nearer the Red Sea. Nephi indicates that the wilderness they traveled in had two mountain ranges, both near the Red Sea. Indeed, this is exactly what is found in Midian, where there is one mountain range near the Red Sea and one nearer the Red Sea, with mountains ascending to over 6,000 feet. The valley of Lemuel was in the mountains nearer the Red Sea. Finally, Nephi wrote that they arrived at the river after traveling 3 days in the wilderness. In biblical times, the land known as the wilderness started near what is today the port of Aqaba at the northern end of the Gulf of Aqaba. Lehi could only have traveled in Arabia with tents and provisions if he had camels. A camel can travel between 20 and 25 miles per day, depending on load and terrain. This meant that their campsite by the river must have been somewhere between 60 and 75 miles from the northern end of the Gulf of Aqaba and somewhere in the shoreline mountains. Does the trail Nephi described lead to a canyon with a stream? We were ready. The next morning, we would follow Nephi's directions and see where they led us. As we traveled into Arabia, we found the terrain just as Nephi had described it, that they came down by the borders near the shore of the Red Sea. On our right were the waters of the Gulf of Aqaba of the Red Sea. Before us, excellent terrain for camels to travel, and on our immediate left were mountains. Nephi's initial instructions worked for about 45 miles. Then the passage along the shoreline ended. Here, the mountains fall directly into the Red Sea. So what did Nephi say they did next? They traveled in the borders or mountains. We were not surprised then that the only wadi or valley into these mountains was found within a mile of where the mountains reached the sea. If we were on Lehi's trail, the prophet would have had only one choice: to enter this valley. But did this wadi lead to a river? We needed to see where this valley led, if anywhere. By the time we reached the end of the wadi, we were 6 miles east into the mountains and 3 miles south from where we left the shoreline. The wadi proved to be a passage through the mountains to a rise where it opened into another wadi that headed south. George knew the shoreline mountains of Midian as a giant maze of intertwined mountains. Yet, here before us was a U-shaped wadi that led straight through the shoreline mountains. We learned later that the name of this valley was the Wadi Tayyib al-Ism. We headed down through the wadi to see where it led. As we passed through the U-shaped saddleback that separated the mountain valleys, we noticed border markers that indicated that the Bedouins still used the mountains to define their tribal borders. We noticed 3 interesting characteristics of the Wadi Tayyib al-Ism. First, it had no exits. If Lehi entered this valley, he undoubtedly would have followed it to its end. Second, it provided an excellent footing for camels. Third, as we followed it down through the mountains, we were quickly coming to our limit of 75 miles, and what we were seeing was typical Midian landscape. No water, no vegetation to speak of, certainly no fruit trees or grain. We were starting to lose hope as our trip speedometer read 72 miles. We had driven almost the equivalent of a full 3 days camel ride, and still there was only rocky terrain. Rather than a fertile valley, all we saw was an occasional acacia tree barely hanging on to life. At this point, the wadi took a sudden turn to the west and headed for the tall shoreline mountains. Here, we expected the wadi to dead end. Instead, we found something Lehi would have been very grateful to have come upon: an oasis of date palms. The Arabs have a saying that the date palm has its feet in the water and its head in the fire. The fire referring to the very high temperatures needed to ripen dates, and the water referring to the abundant water that is needed for the palms. On seeing the palms, Lehi would have known that he had found a supply of water and food for his family. And how did we come upon this fertile valley? We followed exactly Nephi's instructions. In other words, using Nephi's directions, it is almost impossible not to find this oasis. However, the wadi did not end at the oasis. There is a great crack in the granite mountains that separates the oasis from the Red Sea, a canyon of pure granite. Within a few hundred yards of entering the canyon, we came to a true discovery, a springhead that fed a small desert river. Here was a stream of pure water flowing through a spectacular canyon formed from one of the hardest rocks on earth.
How do we know that the river flows all year round? I have visited the river 7 times, including the rainy season and in the driest part of summer, once after it hadn't rained for 14 months. What are the reasons or the facts that indicate to us that the river flows continually? First, we have the algae that grows along the river's banks. Second, the vegetation that grows along the stream. Third, the freshwater snails that live in this river. And what of the valley in which the river is found? It is made of solid granite, one of the hardest rocks on earth. This valley can only be described as firm, steadfast, and immovable.
Lehi's family gathered seeds and fruit of many kinds and also grain. Hundreds of date palms grace the canyon and the oasis in the upper valley. All 3 species of date palms are found in the valley. Delicious teen berries also grow in the canyon. Lehi's family could have collected other seeds and fruits and herbs in the valley. We found grain growing in the valley in 5 separate places. Is there any evidence that Lehi and his family stayed in this valley? Perhaps. On the north side of the oasis, just outside the canyon, is found the ruins of what appears to be a large permanent campsite. Lehi and his family stayed in the valley for months, perhaps even years. They certainly would have built windbreaks, storage areas, and tables and utility walls out of stone. Finding an antiquities site in the valley raised questions. Had archaeologists visited the site? What was it? And how old were these ruins? In search for the answers to these questions, George Potter traveled to King Fahd University of Petroleum and Minerals in Saudi Arabia. He knew that a team of international archaeologists had surveyed Northwest Arabia in 1980. George's research led him to the archaeological collection of the main library. Volume 5 of the Journal of Saudi Arabian Archaeology had the information he needed. The ruins in the Wadi Tayyib al-Ism had been visited by the survey team in 1980. They had classified them as, quote, an encampment, end quote, and cataloged them as archaeological site number 200-81. The archaeologists reported that they found surface artifacts at site 200-81, including stone enclosures, stone monuments, and pottery shards. We also found pottery shards at the encampment and questioned their age. The archaeologists classified the pottery at site 200-81 as Iron Age Median and Hellenistic. They defined the Iron Age for this region as late second to mid first millennium BC. We now knew that the campsite dated back to at least the time of Lehi. Nephi wrote that his father built an altar and gave thanks to God. Above the ruins of the campsite, Michael Bellerson from Germany and Sachanan from New Zealand discovered what they believe was a possible altar. Mike explains.
Very close to the campsite, and we found some mankind structures, and there's a possibility that this might be Lehi's altar. This being a high place would be a proper site of an altar. Lehi's altar would have been a large stack of uncut rocks like this one. These black rocks are not natural to find here on this hill, so somebody had to bring them up here. I found laying on the ground many pieces of broken pottery. I found it interesting because pottery was used to contain oil and scrolls for the altar ceremony.
We found other structures that could have been used as altars in the Wadi Tayyib al-Ism, including this one on the south side of the wadi. One other man-made feature caught the eye of Richard Wellington from England, a small stone box buried in the floor of the canyon.
Okay, did that work?
Wow.
You saw it?
Works very well.
Oh, thank goodness. I was worried the whole time you saw nothing.
Oh, no,
Okay,
it was
that's
very
great. Okay, let's continue then, okay, with the presentation. Okay, is this the Valley of Lemuel? Well, and the River Laman, I believe it is because it's the only river that flows in Saudi Arabia. But if we can tie it into the rest of the trail, then certainly if this is where they camped and the trail follows from it, we can be pretty certain we're looking at the Valley of Lemuel. The question is, when Nephi was in the Valley of Lemuel, he realized that he would be given a promised land that was across the many waters. He knew he'd be building a ship. But how old was Nephi when he received that revelation, that he knew he had to build a ship? Remember, he came from an elite family where they had lots of riches. In those days, rich people did not do manual labor. They had servants that did all that for them. Nephi was a highly educated boy. He could read and write in several languages. So it's very, hard to believe that he had any kind of manual skills when he was receiving that revelation. And how old would he have been? The Jewish tradition for marriage age is 13 for boys, 13 years, 1 day. if you weren't married by the time you were 20, the rabbi or a court would force you to get married. So we know that Laman wasn't married. So say he was 20. Lemuel was younger, 18 and a half, maybe. Maybe Sam was 15, oh, excuse me, 17. Nephi, perhaps he was 15 years old. However, if there's some sisters in there as well, he must have been a pretty young boy at the time he received that revelation. What would he have known about building a ship and captaining a ship? Probably nothing. John Swanson of BYU says there's no hint that can be found in the text that anyone in Nephi's party had any knowledge of nautical matters whatsoever. In fact, the Jews were landlocked people. They had to go to, Solomon had to go to Hiram from Lebanon to build his ships. So what did Nephi need in order to build a ship? Well, he needed timbers, strong, straight timbers. He needed cotton for sails. I believe he needed someone to show him actually how to manually make a ship. It's one thing to get a blueprint from the Lord, but how do you turn around and make planks that are 1/64th in exactness so they'll seal in the water? How do you learn how to sail, to train a crew back when there were no pulleys and things of that nature? And he certainly needed a calm harbor where they could build a ship above the water, where it's protected, and that huge weight to then lower it down on ways into calm water. He needed a calm harbor. And how did Nephi learn all the different skills he acquired, this great Renaissance man? How did he learn how to make gold plates, build swords like Laban's, build a ship, build a temple like Solomon's, and to forge? He needed somewhere to learn that. Someone had to teach him how to do those things. Let's say that the Lord commanded you in a dream tonight to build a 747 and to fly that 747 that you built to Tonga. Of course, you had to be the pilot too. Now, okay, this is kind of equivalent to what Nephi was up against. Okay, now certainly you're going to pray and you're going to ask the Lord for all the help you can get, and he's going to help you. But you're probably also going to go to somewhere to seek the right materials and get experts who can help you. Maybe we'll head to Seattle or out to St. Louis and get some information about how to actually build this. Well, Nephi had the same situation where he had to go find those skills. And he had such a place to go to, a place called Ophir. Now, Nephi only mentions one harbor in all the texts. When he's quoting Isaiah, he mentions the harbor of Ophir. In fact, Ophir is mentioned 10 times in the Old Testament. Fueled by the incense trade, Ophir was probably the wealthiest place in the world at that time and the most sophisticated harbor. They were the only captains who actually knew how to sail out in open seas. The LDS Bible Dictionary says of Ophir, probably a port in southern Arabia. And we have the Smith's Bible Dictionary saying, hence we can conclude that Ophir was in southern Arabia upon the border of the Indian Ocean. Many scholars, many historians believe that Ophir was the natural harbor of Korori, which was used for the frankincense trade in antiquity. Well, we're going to target on this harbor here and see what we can find. In fact, I'm not going to actually take you to Korori and show you all the amazing things that are there that were consistent with the Book of Mormon. That's another presentation on Nephi's harbor. But there's only one trail in antiquity that led to Korori that had waters and the supplies. It was the famous frankincense trade, because that is where frankincense grew, is in that part of Oman in antiquity. Why did Lehi need a trail? Well, you know, I grew up, I was kind of taught that Lehi was sneaking his way through Arabia, not meeting anybody. Well, that's totally inconsistent with reality. Not only today, but in his times. He needed water. There are no rivers in Arabia except for that one. All the other water sources are wells that have been dug by the tribes, and they charged for people to drink the water. Remember Lawrence of Arabia, the movie? Opens up, you have Omar Sharif shooting some guy for drinking in his tribal well. You didn't drink out of somebody's well, you had to pay for that. That's how they made money, those tribes. But Lehi not only needed water, he needed fresh camels, he needs food, he needs supplies, protection. They're there for 8 years. How many diapers did they go through? How many pairs of tennis shoes did those little kids go through? I mean, they needed supplies and they had to go down the trail. If they went off the trail, they would have been attacked by outlaws and they would have died of thirst within a few days. So they had to be on the trail. There was only one trail at that time, which is the old frankincense trail. So we know that the trail started at Oman, actually started in Damascus. And it came down by Amman near Jerusalem, led down near where the Valley of Lemuel is, and ended at the harbor here of Ophir. It was the only trail that existed in 600 BC. There was no trail down Western Arabia at all until 900 BC, 980, when they finally forged a trail along the coast. But this was the only trail that existed in antiquity. 95% of that trail had never been seen by a Westerner when the Book of Mormon was published. Think about that. How could Joseph Smith have written anything about that trail? Its directions, its place names. He had no sources at all to tell him how to do that. Okay, so what happens here? The Book of Mormon says they traveled what? They went south, southeast. 3 times they mentioned they went in the same direction. Finally, they came to a place, Nahom, where the trail turned east and went directly east to where they built the ship. That is exactly the course of the frankincense trail. The trail exactly ended here at the harbor of Korori. So, was Korori Ophir? That's a question we need to consider. Was it really Ophir? Well, Korori is now a UN UNESCO World Heritage Site. When I first went there, there was nothing there at all, except an old harbor and some ruins. But today it's a World Heritage Site because it was one of the most important economic zones in the ancient world. This has settlements back to the Bronze Age. Shipbuilding has been documented there back to 1000 BC, shipbuilding. And it was where they exported frankincense by ship to India, Mesopotamia, Egypt, and other areas, all the way back to the Bronze Age. It was an active harbor where Nephi could have got the resources he needed. I had the privilege of meeting a scholar, a local scholar historian named Ali Al-Shari. If you ever go on my tours, we always start by going to his house. He is the most gracious man you'll ever meet, a wonderful person, a devout, very devout Muslim, which I'll explain later. He also believes that the Book of Mormon is true, by the way. But that just came recently. But before that, he was a scholar. He's written 11 books. He's lectured at BYU. He grew up in the tribal lands of Korori, the upper valley to Korori. At the request of the LDS Family Search, he allowed his genealogy to be digitized. So the last time I went there, we had 4 people from LDS Family Search go there to digitize his genealogy. Now, why is that interesting? Because Ali, we were just sharing books one time. He was giving me his books. I was giving him my books. And he was taking me on a tour of Korori in the valley above it where he grew up. And I noticed in his book, he had his genealogy. And lo and behold, he can trace his genealogy back to Ophir from the Bible, which is in Genesis chapter 10, the sons of Aktun. Okay, so he is absolutely convinced that, according to his tribal records, that this area in blue is called Ophir, which contains Korori. So I knew that for quite a while here. You see down here, Ophir, blah, blah, blah. But what did it mean? Not until recently did I actually look up the meaning of Ophir. Nephi called the land of his harbor bountiful because of much fruit and wild honey. Smith's Bible Dictionary, Ophir equals abundance. Ophir means abundance. Smith's Bible Dictionary, as you know, is a non-Latter-day Saint resource, okay, that scholars use. You put bountiful in the Microsoft thesaurus, and what do you get? Plentiful, abundant. Hitchcock's Bible Names Dictionary, Ophir means a fruitful region. If you ever come with me on my tours, we'll go up to the Korori, we'll go to the valley above it, and you'll see they're still collecting wild honey up there. So it's pretty convincing. Okay, so let's just assume that this is bountiful. And this is the Valley of Lemuel. What else does the Book of Mormon tell us about the trail of Lehi through the wilderness? Well, they went, after they left the valley, they went to Shazer. And what does Shazer mean? Well, it means the place of the trees. This is the frankincense halt on the old trail, 60 miles south-southeast of the Valley of Lemuel. The whole wadi has got these date palms and wild trees growing in it. What does Shazer mean? According to Hugh Nibley, the linguist, it means the pass of the trees or the place of the trees. No, I didn't need Hugh Nibley to know this. When I lived in Arabia, I'd just say to my Arab office partner, hey, what's Shazer mean? Oh, it means place of the trees. And that's one place there that you have all these trees going for miles along this wadi. But what Nibley found was very interesting is that ancient Arabic or Hebrew, Shazer would have been spelled differently. In the 6th century BC, it would be S-E-G-O-R. Why do I lay it out that way? Because in Arabic, you do not write vowels. You only write consonants. So actually, if you're writing in Arabic or Hebrew, it would be S-G-R. That's how you'd spell Shazer in Arabic, using those letters. And so when you're living in Arabia, anybody that's living in Arabia knows that when you see a Arabic name written in Latin characters, it's going to be spelled 10 different ways by whoever wrote it at that time, because they put in their own vowels. So what we're really looking for in the old spelling of Shazer is S-G-R. Now, this is a map here of Korori, the area where the frankincense trees grow. And on this French map, you see both the old spelling, Shazer, or Shazer, okay? Because that's where the frankincense trees grow. I've only seen Shazer one other map, and I've gone through hundreds of maps in Arabia. And what do you have? Here's the Valley of Lemuel. These are the halts on the frankincense trail. The next halt down from the valley, 60 miles from the Valley of Lemuel, south-southeast, is Shazer. Pretty interesting, huh? Now you have Shazer, Book of Mormon place name. Where did they go from there? Well, they went through the fertile parts, 1 Nephi 16, 14 to 16. They traveled in the most fertile parts, and they traveled in the fertile parts, okay? Now, this really threw me when I was looking for Lehi's trail. Fertile parts, what is he talking about, Joseph Smith? He's a farmer. What's fertile about this place? Because when you leave Shazer, this is what the trail looks like. Looks like you're traveling on Mars. But we actually knew that the trail would cut through the mountains and go through a long valley. And that valley is about 100 miles, starts about 100 miles south of Shazer. And this group of villages that run for about 200 miles is called the Mushaharin. That's its name. This is one of the halts on Mushaharin called Dedan. And this is very curious. Now, these halts are about 20 miles apart, kind of like the California mission system, you know, where you travel one day and by the nighttime you had a mission to stay in. These halts were along the trail and they were about 20 miles apart, and each one had a fertile farm. They would take the water from the aquifer, and then they would create an agricultural community to support the frankincense trade. And they made lots of money selling supplies, fresh camels, dates, whatever, to the caravans. because the caravans back then would have been like 1,000 camels. They wouldn't be 20. They'd be 1,000, 2,000 camels at a time, bringing the frankincense up from Southern Arabia to the Mediterranean and to Baghdad and so forth. Now, this one is very interesting, okay? This particular site called Dedan. And now, no Westerner had seen the Mushahareen or Dedan until Charles Dote in 1876, quite a few years after the Book of Mormon was published. The people in this town, Dedan, they were very proud of the fact that they were originally settled by the grandson of Abraham, Dedan. They were the Dedanites. But in the mid 6th century BC, right after Lehi would have come through here, the people in this valley changed their name to the Lehianites, the people of Lehi or Lehi. And it's crazy because you go there, there's a temple, there's a baptismal font. They worship only one God in the form of a man. It's just a really amazing place, which I hope someday we can do a lot more research in. But no Westerner had seen that. And I have a whole video that I do about these Lehianites because they're very interesting. They're still a tribe today, and part of the tribe has moved to Jerusalem, and they're Jews, okay? So it's very, very fascinating place. Well, let's get back to Mushahareen. This is the name of this place, these sections of villages. What does it mean? Let's go to Nigel Groom of Oxford University. He's a world expert on Arabic place names. So you have here the Dictionary of Arabic Topography and Place Names. He states in his book, I am quoting, Mushahareen, which has been the name since Ramesses II of this area. It means fertile pieces of land, a direct quote from his book, which I have. So pieces and parts are synonyms. Joseph Smith's translation is perfect. They left the valley, they went to Shazar. After that, they went through the Mushahareen, the fertile parts of land. Okay, we have at least one more place name we gotta go over through, and that is Nahom, where the trail turned east and where Ishmael died. Okay, again, what do we know about this? Well, we know the trail changed. Again, what are we looking for? We're looking for NHM in Arabic. And there we've discovered 5 different places, myself and other scholars, 5 different places around Yemen, central Yemen, where you have Nahum or Nahum. Okay, take out the vowels. What do you have? NHM, the continents. So you have here, what happens to the frankincense trail at that point? It turned and went due east. So there we have Lehi's trail, and we have its trailhead basically at the Valley of Lemuel. Now, just one other thing, they traveled east from that point, and we know that they ate raw meat and they had little fire. That trail was not actually explored until the 1990s by archaeologist Jairus Aarons, and this is what it looks like. I drove out there onto the trail. Now, do you see much wood out there to have a fire with? If you're lucky, you might find some camel dung, and that's it. And not only that, but the people in that area, they dry their meat in the sun and they eat it raw because they don't have fire. So I thought it very interesting. So what happens? They then get to Ophir. Okay, the trail came along southern Oman here, and then it turned and went down into this dark area. What's that dark area? Why is it dark? This is the empty quarter, sand dunes sort of the size of Utah. Nothing out there. All of a sudden, that dark area is trees, okay? It's where the trail ended, okay? Why does it end there? Why is it dark again? It's because the monsoons come in during the monsoon season. They hit that part of Arabia, then the hot temperatures push the monsoons back off to Africa. It's like 1,000th of 1% of all of Arabia, and it looks like Scotland, okay? So these are the ruins of the old harbor there. This is a painting from UNESCO. what they thought it looked like in antiquity. This is the empty quarter, which is like 40 miles away from this down here. This is the valley we call it Upper Valley from the harbor, okay? It's just gorgeous, it's like a paradise. In fact, it's a national park in Oman, and they write poems about this beautiful valley. And these are some of the fruit trees. Now, after I told you, we traveled 50,000 miles in the desert looking for Lehi's trail. And I'll tell you, a lot of that was really rough. Back then, there were no paved roads. We just camped wherever we could. And so when we finally got to the last chapter of the book where we had to write about Oman, we flew down to Salalah and the area there where Korori is, and we camped at the Crown Plaza Hotel. And we're just taking it easy at that time. And so we decided that we were tired of the buffet at the Crown Plaza, and we'd go to the Pizza Hut and get a pizza. We went 5 miles and we passed 42 fruit stands. Now, not only does that happen now, but they've proved that that's what it looked like in 600 BC. They were growing fruit there. So again, I'd love to sometime come back and tell you all about the wonders of the Nephi's harbor, but we don't have time tonight. As Paul said, when we looked at the book, we got done looking at the book and exploring Lehi's trail, we realized that there are 81 assertions in the Book of Mormon that talk about ancient Arabia. And not only are all 81 of those things there, but they're in the right order. What is the probability that Joseph Smith could have come up with that? Dream that up. 95% of the trail was even known to ancient scholars. Well, to give you an idea of the odds of Joseph Smith being able to write that, think of it this way. You'd have to get 81 things right with no errors and in the right order. So what's the probability that Joseph Smith could have known about Shazar, the interpretation of Mushaharim, that there would be wells at certain places, that there was a river in Arabia, 72 miles from where the wilderness of Arabia started. All these things he had to have guessed. What would be the probability of guessing there's a river in River of Arabia in the right place? 1,000,000 to 1? Let's just be very kind to Joseph Smith. Let's say he could have guessed those 2 to 1. 2 to 1 odds, he could have got it right. Have you ever flipped a coin 81 times and gotten heads 81 times in a row? Don't try it, okay? The probability is so great that I can't even pronounce what the odds are to 1. I gave this presentation in Seattle, Washington, and a statistician was there from Boeing Corporation. He came up and he says, George, your math is wrong. The probability is even higher or greater that he couldn't have ever guessed this. So as a comparison, something that maybe we can understand, NASA thought that there was a piece of space that was totally empty. Now, they had the Hubble telescope. They thought, there's a part of space, there's nothing there. What part of space are they talking about? If you held a dime at arm's length, that piece of space would be the size of Franklin's eye, Franklin Roosevelt's eye, at arm's length. That's how small it was. So they focused the Hubble telescope there, and this is what they found. They were shocked. It wasn't empty at all. What they were seeing were not stars, but thousands of galaxies. Now, scientists believe that there are at least 300 billion known or galaxies in the known universe. The average galaxy has 100 billion stars. So how many stars are there in the known universe so far? 300 billion times 100 billion, right? The probability of Joseph Smith guessing all those facts about Arabia would be less than the odds of any two of you going home tonight, looking out into space and pointing at the exact same star. So I bury my testimony that Joseph Smith could never have written the Book of Mormon. It is a true history. Anyway, my books and my films are located on the website, www.nephiproject.com. We saw one of the 6-part series on Lehi's Trail, but we also did one on the people of Lehi. And remember, we did one on the Mount Sinai and the Jaredites. So anyway, I'd like to thank you for your time. And if you have any questions, I'll stop this share and I'll come back to you.
Thank you, George.
You're very welcome.
We had a very interesting presentation last week from Ralph Williston, who suggested that there may have been a variance in the sea level along the Red Sea Valley and all the way up into the Dead Sea. That would have also have possibly provided a variance from what we have today in terms of the distance. Lehi's family would have traveled from Jerusalem, for example, and then back to get the records.
Well, you know, he is correct in one regard. You know, there probably hasn't been that much of a change, but when I was doing this research, I used we had LDS member there, Wes Garner, and he was a geologist for the Shell Oil Company and on contract with Aramco. And he was assigned to that area to look for, you know, I guess the formations that would give natural gas. And he was telling me that the sea level should, or not the sea level, but the mountains have actually risen up about 300 feet since antiquity, because it's right on the Rift Valley. You know, the Gulf of Aqaba is the Rift Valley. It's a section of it. And so you have the continental shifts plates pushing those mountains up.
Mr. Potter.
Hey, Neil, jump in. Go ahead, Neil.
Yes, Mr. Potter, I am very interested in the mountains along the side of the Red Sea. When we're translating the Book of Mormon into Spanish, we ran into a problem with the word borders. And we could not effectively translate that. There's no effective translation for the word border and make it fit the context unless there's something like mountains. Are you suggesting that there was an ancient term called borders that named those mountains, or are you just saying that's what they actually are?
No, I'm saying that that's the actual name of the mountains. The mountains there, where the valley is called the Hijaz, it means the borders in Arabic. Okay, and in Hebrew, the same thing. Jabal means borders, or Jibal in Hebrew. And that's from linguist Hugh Nibley. In fact, he said border should have been capitalized because it was actually a place name in the Book of Mormon.
Well, actually, that's what we've been translating.
You know, I'm not a linguist myself, but that's what I know the Arabs call it. And that's what Nibley's saying that they were. And they went down by the borders and they went into the borders. So it had to be something physical.
Right.
The thing is that if you go from the tip of Aqaba and you follow Nephi's directions, you substituting borders for mountains, you'll go right to the valley. You'll drive right to it using Nephi's directions.
Is there a set of references you could give me for those, or I could find that statement officially that the name of the mountains is borders? I've looked for it. I need to put that in the side note when we're translating.
Neil, can you email me that question, please, so I can email you back the source?
Yeah, I'll have Frank Fry do that for me.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, I'm sure it's just right in the book itself now, but it's gonna be Hugh Nibley. Hugh Nibley, if you know who Hugh Nibley was, he was a great
Yeah,
linguist. He translated the Dead Sea Scrolls, was one of the team members for it. So
Which
he's
book?
pretty credible.
Thank you, George.
Yeah, in fact, it's the same thing in, oh, what's that language? I'll just send you what the information I have on it, okay? I know it's in Talmud or whatever it was, Nibley's talking about as well. So it's in at least 3 languages.
Hey, we've reached 9 o'clock, but the questions can go on. So please, those of you that are trying to earn that A, get a good question out.
George, I
Sure.
really appreciate your excellent presentation. And I might have missed the beginning in that I don't know how you had the time or profession that put you in Arabia so long. Can you give me a little background?
Sure. I'm by trade, by profession, I have a finance degree from Berkeley in California, Berkeley. And I'm a CPA, and I'm also got a DBA from Southeastern University. So I originally went over to Saudi Arabia. I worked for KPMG, which is one of the big CPA firms. Then I was a financial vice president and then senior vice president for the company in Europe. And then the Saudi Electricity Company hired me to come over and help them with their finances. So I did that for about 15 years, and then they decided to hire PricewaterhouseCoopers to take my job. So they're spending 10 times the amount of money they were on me, but they wouldn't get rid of me because they liked me. That's the way Arabs are. So they made me a leadership coach. So I would work with the executive vice presidents and the CEO of the company to talk to them about their leadership skills, which were horrible. And I try to help them, and I would say, you guys are terrible. And they'd say, well, help me. And I'd say, why should I? Because you're not going to listen to me anyway. But they'd say, okay. So I'd tell them, and 10 years later, I'd go back and tell them the same thing over again. It was a lot of fun. I really liked the Arab people. And that's why I was there for 27 years. It was really a nice, almost semi-retirement type situation for me. So it gave me time to go out and do a lot of exploring. I never worked after 3 o'clock in the afternoon, so I could write. And you had their religious holidays. I had 6 weeks of vacation every year. So we'd use those vacation times, especially the religious holidays, because it was like a week long. You really couldn't fly back to the US and do all that jet lag stuff. So we used those religious holidays to go out and explore for the Book of Mormon.
Well, thank you so much for that. It's excellent work.
Yeah.
Look forward to reading more of it.
Yeah, thank you.
Ron, go ahead.
George Potter, this is Ron Smith, and I was interested in the mention of the fellow who was the Muslim who believes in the Book of Mormon, and I wondered if you were aware that there's a Surah 46 in the Quran that I believe mentions the Book of Mormon, talks about it. I didn't know if you were aware of that or not.
I am aware of that.
Okay.
I don't know if it's the same verse in the, or ayah in the Quran, but it says that the people of the book, they're not all the same. In fact, if you look at the Quran, just a second, I'm gonna get my Quran out here.
I'm glad he's looking that up. I was going to ask to explain more about that.
Okay, you know, I have some really interesting ideas about the Muslims and Mormons. If you've read my book, The White Bed one, there's 2 sequels which I haven't published. They go into a great deal of depth with that. And my publisher says, you're just gonna get yourself in trouble with the Orthodox LDS if you keep writing these things. Let's see. I'm gonna just show you a verse here.
While you're looking, I think you're looking for a different verse than I was thinking of.
Well, no, I am.
The one that I was thinking of is in Surah 46. It says, "As for those whom ye invoke besides God, show me what part of the earth it was in which they have created. Had they a share in the heavens? Bring me a book sent down by them before this Quran, or traces of their knowledge, if ye are men of truth." And that one, the Book of Mormon was put in the ground in 400 and some AD, and of course the Quran was 570 to begin with. Well, that was Muhammad's birthday was 570. So
Yeah,
it really was a book that was sent down, and it tells about what Jesus had to do with the creation.
yeah. That's interesting. I don't know that one. What's it again? It's 46.
That's 46. Yeah, right at the beginning.
And what's the ayah?
I don't have the it's right at the beginning. Oh, it's 3 to 4.
Okay.
3 to 4.
46.
3 to 4. Yeah.
There's also one. I wrote a book I never published called The House of Joseph. And in there, I know I have a quote where it says, "The people of the book will be given a book which will restore that which has been taken from the book," which is referring to the Bible. So there'll be a people who will come and they will get a book, a new book, which will restore that which has been taken back from out of the Bible or out of the book. The one I love to share with the my Muslim friends is Surah 3, verses 13 to 15. And let me quote it to you. "Not all of them are alike of the people of the book." So the people of the book always refers to the Bible.
Right.
The Muslims, they believe the Jews and the Christians are the people of the book. Okay, would be in the Bible. So not all those Christians and Jews are alike. "A portion that stand for the light, they rehearse the signs of Allah all night long, and they prostrate themselves in aberration. They believe in Allah and the last days. They enjoin what is right, and they forbid what is wrong, and they hasten in emulation in all good works. They are in the ranks of the righteous, and of the good that they do, nothing will be rejected of them, for Allah knoweth them, those that do right." I say, okay, who are the people of the book who Allah joins as the righteous? They have no idea. There's so much wonderful things in there, in the Quran and in the Hadith of the Prophet, that are fascinating, that really are totally in line with what Joseph Smith taught, and they respect it. It's very odd. I tell people in Arabia, why did I stay there 27 years? I never met a better people in my life. They pray 5 times a day. They fast. They're humble. They believe in God with all their hearts. Now they might be misled. They might, just have a portion of the light, but they're certainly a good people. And so, I was there feasting on their goodness. And I really believe there's, maybe Heavenly Father gave them what they could use, and they weren't ready for the higher laws. But I'm fascinated by what's in there. Of course, they're very devout. they are very concerned about the last days, just like we are. You know, Muhammad made lots of different prophecies about the last days, which are fascinating. For example, my Arab friends are worried that the end of the world's coming because Muhammad said that in the last days, barefoot Arabs would be in a race to build the highest tower. You know, and you have the tower there, Khalifa Tower in Dubai, which is the tallest in the world, and Kuwait's building one that's taller. And in Arabia, you have in Jeddah, they're going to build a building that's going to be 50% higher than that one. And they're all worried what's going on. And Muhammad said, for example, that in the last days, you could pray in Damascus in the morning and at Mecca in the afternoon. Of course, that was ridiculous in his time. But of course, all you do is get on an airplane and fly down now. It's very easy. Or you could go from Mecca to Medina and back 5 times a day and pray and do your Muslim stuff. And of course, they are building a speed train now. You can do that very easily 5 times a day. It's just a lot of very interesting, fascinating parallels.
George?